and welcome to The Found Cause, where we found a cause for the Lord Jesus Christ. I'm Michael, man behind the machine, and to my left is... distracted Sebastian. You okay there, Sebastian? You getting a high score or something? You take my headphones? Is there even a wire? Is that controller connected to anything? No, it's not. Who are you? What's your name? Tell me the intro. Stop playing video games.
I am Sebastian, the bookkeeper.
That's one of our intros. That's it. We're going to talk about video games today. If you couldn't notice.
I couldn't hold it in after you said you connect.
You can see me and Sebastian real serious games. You can probably tell by the virtual episodes that I'm wearing these like super red, flaming hot headphones here for pure gamers. And I'll say this. Video games are something that I've grown up with since I was a little boy. My dad played video games, I played video games, so I'm certainly biased in this scenario, as in I've played them before, so just to be upfront about it, when we talk about video games, I'm somebody who has played video games, so I have a dog in the fight, I actively play them. So does Sebastian. So take it with a grain of salt. What we're going to say comes from people who play video games, but the topic is today specifically, how do video games fit into the Christian life? And in particular, it's a rebuttal episode, I think, to the alpha male ministries out there, whether they're Christian alpha male ministries or the many non-Christian alpha male ministries out there that lump video games in with a lot of their other protocols and other things that are supposed to de-panzify men, which I'll say from the get-go, I appreciate what many things that alpha man ministries try to say, especially the Christian ones, because they come from a Christian worldview. But in case you're not familiar with this strange niche, and you're not a man, or you're not a man that has seen these weird ads on YouTube, or gone down the rabbit hole on YouTube, or wherever else, there are psychologists like Jordan B. Peterson, pretty famous guy out there that's all about picking yourself up by your bootstraps. Not Christian, by the way. Claims to be a Christian, but he's like, Christianity is a myth, and we use its truths to help us. So not a Christian.
Right.
But he has a lot of correct things to say. Like he says, before you go out telling other people what to do, you have to first get your life in order, right? Which I understand and I appreciate. And I think a lot of men, especially young men, need to hear that kind of thing because society is pretty coddling. So I appreciate a lot of the alpha male kind of things that come, not just Jordan B. Peterson. He's probably the most mild of all these kind of guys. There's plenty, like millions of gurus out there. As many gurus as there are trying to tell you how to drop ship for like $1 million by sitting on your couch, which there's millions of those, that especially proselytize young men. There's an equal amount of alpha male people who are telling you how to dress, and they've got beards squared off more than mine, and they're buff, and they're telling you how to work out, and they're telling you how to get women, pickup artist kind of guy. So imagine the old pickup artist kind of guy has transitioned in the modern age to being a alpha male guru. So there are alpha males, not to be confused with alpha male gurus. Alpha male gurus are usually alpha males kind of attitudes, and they are trying to tell other men how to be manlier. So there's worldly ways of doing that. They're all about like picking up chicks and being cool and honored. To Christian versions, which equally are about finding a godly wife and being honored by people around you and building up your communities and stuff like that. But I'm thinking of a podcast I know called It's Good to Be Man. And you can see the theme there, right? Alpha male ministry. In any case, so that's the summary in case you're not familiar with the genre. Mm-hmm. They often take for granted, I think, that video games are one of the many things that society is that's happening in society right now that are making men lazy and not going out, no go-getters. They're not going out and getting ladies. They're not going out and getting married. They're not going out and getting a career or a better promotion or building a boat or whatever they might be doing. And so often you'll hear those alpha male gurus really just like dismissing video games as one of the many things, get off your bed, stop playing video games, and get a job, and do some push-ups, like that classic. Sometimes you need to do push-ups, and some people talk about do need to drop video games, but it's actually proliferated more than just the alpha male gurus. This is something that most men, especially the older generation typically, will also associate video games with like childishness and laziness and things like that, which we're going to talk about because they're not totally unfair criticisms, but we want to give it with a more balanced look. So you might be asking at home, video games are not just for boys, There are women that play video games, true. We, of course, me and Sebastian are both men, so we're going to come in from the man's point of view anyways. But also, there's not a pernicious alpha woman industry that is also hating against video games. That's not really a cultural milieu. So
In fact, it's sometimes the opposite. Women can play video games too.
Oh yeah. So I mean, if depending on what you define as like alpha, female. Alpha, by the way, is this, I don't even know where it comes from. It's a weird philosophy that there are two kinds of animals, humans or animals. There's alphas, the A in the alphabet, the first ones, the big boys, the ones that are leaders, the ones that do push-ups, don't play video games, and get all the women. And then there's betas, and those are the second, B, B-A-B, alpha, beta. And the beta men are the ones that never get married and are always subservient and weak and all that stuff. So that's, I don't know where it comes from. It's not a Christian philosophy, but it is a pretty well-known psychological, I think it's like evolutionary psychology philosophy. Because we used to be animals, or we are still animals in our view, but we came from this world of like eat or be eaten, that there were two dichotomies. There's alpha and beta. So I'll circle back. There's alpha women, and depending on how you say that, alpha women, they might be like pro-female, hardcore feminists, and sometimes they're like, video games fulfill the secret fantasies of men. We have to be in video games too because... I'm going to stop the shrill voice, but because we have to be represented and women can play video games just as good as men. Yeah, of course, okay, of course women can. There's nothing like different with their hands that they can't play the same control or whatever. But I think we all know from experience that just like there are more women in the fashion industry than men, there are more men in the video game industry and programming, and then also the games that are played than women. And I think that has to do with technical interests. Like men are usually more technically inclined, meaning that they're more interested in how mechanics work, and so they're more often going to be programmers. And programmers often are interested in video games because it's a computer-related thing. And women are usually more social and tactile, so they're... I'm just comparing the fashion industry versus the video game industry, but they would be better suited for the fashion industry. And that's not to say that there aren't women that are good programmers, because there are, and there's not men that aren't good fashion designers, because there are, but we can't deny the inherent God-given trends that are between men and women. So I'll just say we're gonna ignore the female crowd out there. I don't have much to say, but do you have anything to say about girl gamers?
No, I'm afraid not.
The one thing I'll say this: supposedly articles come out because they're trying to show that men and women are the same. There's no differences, and of course this is an obvious area of difference of interest. At least there's articles out there that say women play just as many video games as men, and all this type of stuff. Kind of, especially in the age of the mobile phone, women play supposedly. Like large percentages more casual games on the phone, Candy Crush or Crossy Road, I don't know, all the typical phone games that are light and quick and puzzly. I think puzzle games are usually more women slanted as well, like Sudoku and other things like that. Again, not to say that men don't play those kind of things. I'm just giving you the statistics. So there are women who play video games, but when me and Sebastian are thinking video games, I'm really not thinking like while you're on the toilet or waiting for a bus. I'm thinking like you sat down to play a video game, whether it's on the Xbox or your computer or virtual reality or whatever. And typically a video game is either highly role-play-y or it's highly competitive. It's usually one of the two. Because you're either like role-playing as a person who's like exploring a world, and so it's not competitive at all, it's all single-player, or you're not really role-playing as a Call of Duty guy. You're just trying to beat the other people that are playing the game, right? And I think that's why it speaks to men more, is because it's highly competitive.
Grand strategy too.
Yeah, that's kind of more role-play, isn't it?
I suppose you're
kind of a puzzle.
I suppose.
So that's all your background, in case you're not familiar with this whole scene, the video game scene, the alpha male scene. I want to take some of the arguments of the alpha male gurus and dissect them. Before I begin, Sebastian, anything you want to say about, have you ever seen, am I the only guy that's ever seen, between us two, that has seen these alpha male gurus? Have you ever seen these dudes, or am I flying solo here?
It was, the first time I saw one was when you introduced me to that podcast.
Oh yeah.
That's the closest that's the closest one I've ever been to, but not Christian one. I've never encountered that now.
So, I'm probably biased also in seeing these people all the time, because I watch a lot of like things that alpha male channels target on YouTube, and so they'll like send me ads. Also like people that are building bodybuilders and like quick money scheme people. They know my age on YouTube. I watch on YouTube, so they like target me. I see the ads incessantly, and they're all kind of the same kind of guy. Like the same ones that are trying to sell you a workout plan. Typically also the same kind of guys trying to get rich quick scheme, and then also they're like an alpha male guru. So I see a lot, but it might not be like a super pervasive thing in culture. I see it all the time, so we're going to talk about it. Anyways, they, like I said, flippantly label video games as a thing that make men weak. So like let's not touch video games, they're unclean. It's a thing that weakens men, kind of like, suck a pacifier or any list of childish things that keep you childish. And again, a lot of advice is perfectly good. Here's their three main objections to video games. First and foremost, they say it's childish to play video games. Men, once you become an adult, don't play video games because games are for boys and work and life and getting women. That's for men. Any comments there, Sebastian?
I can think of a few games my brother could not play. Like I don't think he could play. My younger brother. So yeah. I think it really depends on the game because like Candy Crush. Is that the way you think it's childish, or are you thinking of something that's a little bit more complicated? So I would say it depends on that age thing. And I mean, pretty much like anything you could say is childish. You could even say any sport is childish.
It's kind of my thought. So I think the general assumption here is that games are like silly and there's no real consequence, and so men have to do things that are consequential. Now, I totally agree that men should be doing things that are consequential and ignoring reality, things like that. But those same alpha men don't turn around and say, "Oh, you guys gotta stop being sissified and playing basketball because it's a game, and games for kids, and my kids play basketball. Real men don't play basketball." They'd never do that because I think the association and because they play basketball, it's not something that they lump into that category. Now, equally, you can be really childish and be obsessed about basketball, which I think is a generally immature thing to be obsessed about something that's inconsequential. But it doesn't necessitate it being immature. And same thing for video games. Like you can play and be obsessed with immature video games. Mm-hmm. Not to be some like weird snob and say, "Oh, you peasants play Candy Crush and I play, only the highest echelon, European style sport." But I am going to be snob and say, yes, there are some games that children play typically, and games that adults play. Kind of like books or anything else, right? Like reading books isn't childish. And you could equally say it's pansifying men because when you read a book, you sit on your butt and you read, but typically that's not the alpha male guru thing to say stop reading books, right? And there are children's books that would be weird and immature if you still be reading Nancy Drew when you're 40 or our age. So same thing, right? There's video games that are equally childish.
That's very interesting. So see, if you take that assumption to different scenarios, you try to see how consistent it is. It's foolish. It doesn't make much sense. If you apply it on other areas.
I think it has no truth to it, right? Like we can imagine, and I think we've probably seen, if you know people who play video games, how they are childish when they play a particular video game, and so it rings true. Playing games is childish, but it's not a very consistent argument. And I think the underlying problem with somebody who's immature is not that they play video games, that they're immature, and they should fix that. If they fix their immaturity, it wouldn't translate into video games. The video game isn't causing their immaturity. Like someone throws a controller against the wall, the problem probably is the video game. It could be maybe they need to stop playing that particular game or that style of game, but it's probably more that they have an anger problem.
A character issue.
Yeah, and they need to deal with that, and that's the challenge part, not the video game itself. Second main alpha male guru attack on video games is that they are neglectful of the body, right? If you want to be sculpted and jacked and sculpted, ripped, I don't know the words, you can't play video games, right? Because video games, they suck the life out of your TV screen, sucks all the protein out of you. And of course, I mean, if you look at people who are professional video gamers, or like people who make it a large portion of habit, of course they're usually scrawny and or obese because they are neglectful of their body. I mean, there's not too many, or they're either neglectful of their body, or they weren't bodily gifted, and therefore they, one of the other options they have is play sports. If they were bodily gifted, they probably would have done something else. So I think there's some confirmation bias in saying that it's neglectful of the body, but we can all see if you play video games, it's usually not an active thing, so it is associated with laziness.
I wholeheartedly agree. So I would say it's based on the body. So if you have a body that's been gifted, and can talk about that later too, that the body that you have is what God determined you would have, then you're going to have different desires, different wants. So you're going to be more inclined perhaps to do more physical activity. So, and there's also the aspect of laziness. that's a whole different can of worms we're going to talk about later too.
Yeah, I think that's how I would rebut this point, is that, again, just like with the first point, the problem isn't the video game. It's a mental thing, right? Now, I understand video games affect the mind, you're playing the game with your mind, but if you're playing a video game, even if you play, and I've done it before, even if you play for 4 hours on the weekends, take you one day and you play 4 hours of video game, okay? That's not necessarily neglectful of the body. Although it sounds weird, right? It sounds bad. It sounds like you're binging on the video game. It isn't necessarily that, and it's only bad if you're also neglecting your body, which is a separate issue, isn't it? Like, if you're not eating right, so you're eating too much or you're eating too little, or if you're not maintaining the body, so you're not doing a workout. Those are the things that hurt the body, not the playing of the video game, if that makes any sense. So yes, I understand if you spend 4 hours on a weekend playing a video game, you're probably not the kind of person who also then worked out, or you're probably not the person who pays too much attention to their food. I understand they come in pairs typically, but it's not. We shouldn't actually point to the video game as the cause here. It's actually a more root issue of laziness, I think.
Wow, so you're just giving me praises because I can do both. I can exercise, I can work out, play.
We're basically the alpha man.
Wow.
Okay. Last and final, and I think this is probably the strongest and most often gone to attack on video games from these alpha male gurus. And again, I'm not just hating on alpha male gurus because they have some good advice. I just don't agree with them at this point. They say that video games inherently are fantasy, right? They're flights of fantasy. They're not real life, and so they are a waste of time. And at best, they're a waste of time, and at worst, they are a hurt to you because you're ignoring your duties and fleeing to a fantasy land, of elves and jewels that you need to stack and whatever game you're playing. It's a fantasy, right? Any thoughts on that, Justin?
My question is, will they be as forward as to apply that to playing cards, watching sports on TV, or reading, or doing that?
Yeah, they probably wouldn't be against it for cards because you're not really in a fantasy, are you? But I think they...
Or any game, any table game, that's what I mean.
Yeah, like Yahtzee.
Sure, any. It doesn't matter which one, but any. Like, you're still playing a game. You're not really winning anything unless you're gambling.
They'd probably be pro gambling, so especially the non-Christians. Like this manly thing, right? Drinking and smoking and gambling. I agree. I think they're inconsistent in this attack too, because there are many things that you might call a fantasy. Now, to be fair, there are people who retreat into video games as a fantasy, and so to escape reality, right? Like, they're unhappy with their real life, so instead they're going to be like, there's a famous video game out there called Second Life from years ago. It's kind of overdone at this point, but it's one like it's your second life. It's your second person. In that game, you can be rich and famous and whatever. And that's kind of the essence of any book or video game or movie or whatever, right? You're kind of entering the fantasy land because you're not, you're just sitting on the couch in your life, but in your TV show, you're with them on a cop case or whatever. And so, I mean, kind of inherent with any fantasy, whether it's book or TV or video games, it is not real life. But I don't think it's bad to go into a fantasy. The bad part about getting lost in fantasy is as if you are either delusional, like you think you are the video game characters, which is
a problem on its own.
There are people, there's like a weird sect of people, but not the vast majority. There's like a weird pseudo-religion that like your soul has a tin person, like you were reincarnated version of video game characters. So like you really are Sonic the Hedgehog. But whatever, that's obviously some fringe group.
Clearly, they've been talking much to Jess about that.
Yeah. But even then, some people like use it as escapism. But the problem there is not that the video game is being used as escapism. The problem is that they're not dealing with the issue, right? Whatever the issue.
There's a character issue that's not being addressed. Likewise, you could escape. When we talk about this, you can escape from your life in many other ways. Some people do it through alcohol or drugs, like to get high or get drunk. For more information, check our episode on
Just Everyone.
Yep. Yes, and if you're disillusioned, you might go into gambling. I have had relatives that are into gambling, and I'm pretty, we can observe is that it's because of their life issues that they're trying to escape from that and get the rush from that. So it's a character problem, not so much the item, and so on, because anything can be misused.
Yeah, and some things I think are like inherently bad in and of themselves, perhaps, like gambling. I don't think gambling is an unclean thing per se. Mm-hmm. Christians would disagree with me. They think it's inherently unclean. I don't think it's inherently unclean, but a lot of time spent gambling there's probably no way to justify that, only because it's pretty much exclusively in the pursuit of wealth, right? It's not just for fun. Like mild gambling is for fun. You can argue that. It's also to win money, but it's for fun. But like hardcore gambling is, I think, inherently unbalanced pursuit of wealth. Whereas hardcore video gaming doesn't have to necessitate, I'm arguing, doesn't have to necessitate not dealing with personal issues, right? It doesn't have to necessitate that you aren't dealing with something you should be in real life and you're escaping the video game. Whereas with gambling, like you must be doing it for wealth, right? Like again, maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong there.
So you brought up an interesting point, I think, for the video game that. And I think it's important to hammer down on this, that where we see an issue, is going to be our opinion, is that if it is infringing, if it is making you neglect other things you should be doing, that's where we draw the line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that goes for anything, right? If you were, even innocuous things, like obviously if you're drinking, like the alpha males would also be against drug use and things like that are taking some of them. That would be against drug use and things that take you away equally. They'd argue against all things that take you away, but they don't really... They don't hammer home that sports, for example, can be equally escapism and not dealing with personal problems. Like anything you do could be an escape against stuff you should be doing that's not that, right? So if you're a big basketball player, like we said, you could be using basketball as escape, and I guarantee most professional or serious basketball players use basketball as an escape. But it doesn't mean basketball is evil. It means that they should be dealing with their personal problems, right? So it's not really a basketball thing, it's a personal thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say last point I want to make on these kind of guys before we get into the biblical expectations of men, as opposed to just the reactionary attack on video games. I kind of think, and maybe this is presumptuous, it is presumptuous, but I'm going to say it anyways. I think the two main camps that flippantly throw video games into this category are either prior addicts to video games. Some of these alpha, not many, but some of these alpha man gurus are people that used to be, old weak men, and now they're like, I've become strong, so become like me. And even putting aside the alpha male gurus, there are some people, Christians and non-Christians alike, who are anti-video game advocates from the male side of things because they used to be addicted to video games. And so they're like, I'll never touch it again. Kind of like people say, I'm never going to touch a drink of alcohol again. And in reference to our last episode, I'm of the opinion that making something unclean because you had a problem with it is okay. I don't know that it's the best way to go about fixing your problem, but perhaps it is. There's probably a scenario where you really shouldn't even dabble in it, right? But prescribing that to others is where I think you cross the line, because they'll make the argument. These ex-addicts often will say there's studies that show that like they're made to addict you. Video games are made to addict you, and insert a lot of things. Made to addict you, and your brain gets into these serotonin cycles where like you receive chemicals for being happy because you were rewarded in a video game, and it keeps you sucked in. You could say the exact same thing about literally anything you enjoy is addictive in that way.
Even a movie.
Yeah, like going to the movies, right? It's addictive. There's food there, and you go with family often, so the serotonin is high. Okay, you could have a movie problem, I suppose, right? But we don't really lump movie as like movie going as addictive. When you could be addicted to going to movies, and if you had a movie problem, it's so alien to us. I'm trying to use it as a good example. If you had a movie going problem, you probably don't need to cut it out cold turkey, I would say, right? You just need to get it under control, right? That's
get the house in order.
I would say same for alcohol, same with video games. Mm-hmm. Again, there's probably cases where I'm wrong and you really do need to cut it out entirely because it is a freedom. It's not a requirement to go to the movies. It's not a requirement to play video games. But I don't think it's an unclean thing. So some of these guys are prior addicts that are overreacting to their prior experience. Second category, people that I think are coming, and this is the obvious, are athletes. Men who never played video games or aren't very good at them or whatever, and they're gifted in other things. So when they see other people playing video games, or old, yeah, people that never had video games because they weren't out or not very good when they were kids, or they never played them. So that goes to all ages. They, of course, don't understand the video game. Why would anybody play the video game? It's a waste of time. There must be something you would like, because I don't do it, right? And I'm being derogatory against these alpha male gurus, because I think that's most of them. Most of them don't play video games. They've never played video games. The most they've seen of video games is like, Candy Crush on their phone, and they think it's dumb, kind of is. Or they see little children like throwing controllers at walls, and they're like, this is Satan's, just like people are like, the devil's gin, or this is water, but they say alcohol is the devil's gin, or they say, it's the devil's, Satan's lettuce, whatever.
Or they imagine a 40-year-old living in the basement with no work.
They have these visions of video game player. They haven't really entered the scenes. I don't think they have a lot to stand on when they judge it.
Mm-hmm.
All I have to say, it's not video game apologizing. Let's talk about actual biblical expectations of men. And this is where I think the conversation really should go, and where it does often go for the alpha male gurus, but I think they should really drop the whole video game angle and actually get to the root cause of the problem. What are genuine biblical expectations of men? How are we called to live? And if we live by these principles, we can play video games and not have any of these issues. And if we are playing video games and these principles are compromised, we need to fix the principles that are being compromised, not necessarily the video game. Right now, again, there's probably times where you need to take a break from a video game because it's causing you to sin, like it's prompting you to sin. Any one of these things we're about to say, but it doesn't mean video games are unclean. That's kind of our final thing. So first one I have on genuine biblical expectations of men is the highest value, that is to pursue godliness. Now, that sounds really posh and niche, because it is. Kitschy Christian, pursue godliness. But that is to say, classic Jesus quote, Gentiles eagerly seek, non-Christians eagerly seek, food and shelter and wealth and clothes. I mean, he says food, clothes, and shelter, but I mean, we don't really think about that too much these days. But yeah, they eagerly seek wealth and worldly things. And God knows that we need wealthy things like that. But we should seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and then all those things will be provided for us. So I think that's the first expectation, godly expectation of men, is to pursue the kingdom of God first, as opposed to women and cars and fun and entertainment. Like, those are secondary things, but some of them are not things we should pursue at all. But the first pursuit should always be godliness.
Mm-hmm. And then if you happen to have some time on the side after doing all your duties and responsibilities, you can spend it watching TV, you can read something, you can play Europa, as I would do.
A video game we play, yes.
Yeah.
And so pursuing godliness, and I could quote a lot. I've got a bunch of scripture pulled up, but I think we all know the scripture calls us to pursue godliness. Like I just said, I quoted from Jesus, but there's also plenty of epistles that talk about pursuing godliness as kind of first and foremost of the goals. And Jesus is the law, it says, and Jesus reiterates the two most important commandments of the law are love the Lord God with all your heart, soul, and strength, and then love your neighbors as yourself. Those are above loving yourself or pursuing pleasures or other things, and pretty plainly, but those are the two first expectations of men. And that's expectations of everyone, right? Everyone, women, men, child, old people, whatever, all need to pursue godliness first. Secondly, I've got working the garden and taking care of it. And I take this from Genesis 2, where God creates the man. And I'll quote it just so you know I'm being legit here, but we all know the creation mandates for mankind were to take care of the garden. And so the exact quote from Genesis 2 is, the Lord God took the man and put him in the garden of Eden to work it and take care of it. So that's the general creation mandate, is to work the garden, take care of the earth, manage the things you're given. And I'm using this as kind of a philosophical point. Manage the things that God gives you to take care of, whether it's the actual earth, so like if you're a farmer or a gardener of some sort, or builder, building houses, or you're a carpenter that works with wood, or you're a call center person or a marketer or whatever, there's all these different professions to do, but work and improve the earth and people around as God calls you, and do it well, right? That's the second thing, that's the second expectation of men, is to be working and taking care of the world that God has given us, right? That's the call.
Yes, and not just work in general, work as if you work for the Lord.
Yeah, and that's, we say it all the time in this podcast, you probably hear it a lot of times from other Christians. Did you have the quote pulled up?
I do, from Colossians 3. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for human masters. Since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ you are serving. And this is in the context too, FYI, for slaves and masters. So this is a...
True. Mm-hmm.
This is saying that even as a slave, which is not a very pleasant position to be in, I would say, because you're not free. Mm-hmm. So that's work, do your duty, as if you were serving Jesus Christ himself. So that's a pretty high bar for Paul to set. So that's what we strive for.
Mm-hmm. And that's, I would say, not that I'm super ranking these like first and second, but I'm kind of putting it second. It's kind of my general assumption here is that first, pursue godliness. Second, work the work that you're given to work. Right? As women and men, we're all given certain stations in life, but I think in particular men are this, like for women it might be number 3 or 4 or whatever. I'm thinking for men, God's made men particularly to desire to and to need to work the ground. I'm using that as like the general, like work the thing that you've been given, producing something, right? Whether it's a service or a product or actual fruit, all of it needs to be worked. Third thing I'd say, and this again, focusing more on men, is providing for your household. And that might sound very alpha male guru of me, because they definitely are stressing that the man is the bread earner and the man has to provide for the household. And sometimes I'm a little jaded when I hear it, because I hear them all say it, and a lot of times they don't back it up with biblical sources. But here's my backup here. This is from 1 Timothy 5, talking this exact same thing. It says, anyone who does not provide for their relatives, and especially for their own household, has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. Let me say that again. Anyone who does not provide for their relatives, and especially for their own household, has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. That's not something that we normally excommunicate for or anything like that in our church, but clearly the Apostle Paul is taking it as, and therefore the Word of God is taking it as something excommunicatable. He's worse than an unbeliever, somebody that ignores his household in particular, even his relatives. That's a sinful person, worse than an unbeliever. So clearly it is a high bar calling for men in particular. I would say this translation, the NIV, is saying anyone who does not provide. I think the Greek is men, but that we often take men to mean generic people, because it does mean generic people. It's just their go-tos to say men. But I would say that this is often the man who's providing for relatives, especially for his own household, because the women would take care of their household, right? They take care of the household they're in, take care of their children, take care of their community and their relatives. But ultimately, back in that culture and still even today, men are the head of the household, the head of the wife, and therefore they're the ultimate responsibility for the household. So if the household was going down, the first person you'd point to say, why didn't you do your job, isn't the woman, it's the man. Now, if you're not pulling your weight as a woman in the household, well, then equally this verse can apply to you, right? It's not something that we ignore. Like, women are not needed to do this, but the first person that needs to provide for the household and relatives is the man. That's what I'd say. So there's my biblical justification for that old alpha male adage that men are the providers, the bread earners. There is biblical precedent for that kind of thing. And then, of course, there's biblical precedent for the man being the head of the household. So let me put that as another point here. Another point of godly expectations for men is to lead and serve the body of the church. And also, I think kind of in the same frame, also be the head of his wife and of his children, mother in the house. I don't have a wife. Sebastian, you don't have a wife. So, of course, it's not an immediate calling. Like, we don't have to be the head of a wife because we don't have a wife. But should we, of course, that would be the calling. But if we don't, then we still have to lead and serve in the body. And I think that has a certain headship to it. Now, of course, it's not head of the body of the church, because that's Jesus Christ alone, right? But we are expected with different leadership positions, like eldership and deaconship is restricted to men, things like that. So I think that's the fourth. I mean, these aren't strict tiered expectations, but it's like the fourth most important calling is for men to lead in whatever station they're given, right? You're not always the head honcho, because there's only one head honcho, but you are expected to lead where you're given authority.
And serve as you serve Christ himself.
Yes. All right, keep flying through. Fifth one I would say here is to not be lazy. Now, this is the one that we alluded to in the in the beginning we were talking about people getting fat or fantasizing into video games and not neglecting their duties. Laziness is a serious issue. And so
Solomon beats it up.
Solomon beats it up. So we've got a bunch of proverbs about laziness. If you want to type in Google, biblical verses about laziness, you'll find a million. We've got a bunch of proverbs. I don't know if you have a couple pulled up. I could also pull up some as well.
Yes, you asked one for Proverbs 10.
Mm-hmm. And again, Proverbs is like chock-full. And I don't like to overuse Proverbs as a book, just because Proverbs is proverbial, it's general advice, meaning that sometimes it's not applicable. Right? It's not necessarily like straight word for word. Always going to happen. Like if you obey your parents and honor them, so that it will go well for you. A lot of people will say, that's from the Ten Commandments, but there's proverbs like that. I can't quote proverbs, but there's proverbs like that that's like guarantee your goodness for doing something. And of course, that doesn't actually guarantee your goodness. It's just the general wisdom is that you should do this because it's good for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that caveat in mind, here's Proverbs about laziness.
Yes, from Proverbs 10, right away, talks about does say that the Lord does not let the righteous go hungry, but he thwarts the cravings of the wicked. Lazy hands make for poverty, but diligent hands bring wealth. He who gathers crops in summer is a prudent son, but he who sleeps during harvest is a disgraceful son.
So it is exhorting not to be lazy, not to sleep through harvest, not to be lazy and bad. We all know what laziness is, that is not doing work. And I think often we stop there in our heads, right? Laziness is just not doing work. But like right now we're not working. I mean, I guess we're doing this, but often we'll always have, the American work day is 8 hours. So you'll have the rest of the day that you're not working per se. Is that being lazy? I would say no. Laziness actually should be defined as not working and neglecting your duties. So, and referencing this proverb and others, that the reference was the lazy, certainly lazy farmer owner, he sleeps through harvest, right? So that's just he sleeps, everybody sleeps, but he's sleeping through work he needs to do. And so because he's being lazy, he's ignoring the work he needs to do, he suffers for it, right? And there's many proverbs that have the same thing, but I don't know if you have any others pulled up about laziness, but they kind of circle around the same thing. You're ignoring something you should be doing.
Yes, diligent hands will rule, but laziness ends in forced labor.
Meaning, diligent, meaning you've got a task, you should do it. If you don't do it, you're going to end up going into debt. That's
the implication. And then you're going to have to sell yourself into slavery. So but that's interesting. Notice, again, there's a fine line for everything we talked about before. In this case, for video games. The harvest, very specific times when you collect crops. For the rest of the year, you plan to take care of the field, but you don't harvest. Harvest is a very specific time. It only happens once, depending on the crop, let's say a year. Let's just say once a year, for the sake of example. You're supposed to be ready to pick it up in preparation for winter, but you're not. You're sleeping through the time that you're supposed to be most awake, so that you can have food later. So, but you're actually the person saying he's sleeping through it. So the moment that you're supposed to be awake, you're sleeping through it because you're lazy. So it's not that sleep or rest is bad per se. There's a time and place for anything. Likewise, there's time to work, and then there's a time to sleep. This person is sleeping when he should be working at that specific moment.
Yeah. And again, I think you probably naturally know when you're being lazy. And laziness, I would extend to procrastination, which I think we all have experience with procrastination. When there's something that you should be doing
in college,
doing something else that's not that. So you're not necessarily being lazy, right? And I think this is the way we kind of justify that we're not being lazy. We're being productive because although I need to do my taxes, I painted my door, or I, created a new dishwashing method. Like you're doing something that's not the thing you don't want to do, and it's not, you're not really necessarily being productive, right? You're really ignoring the tasks that you need to do. So video games, like many other tasks that we can do, is totally often used for procrastination. I'm not going to deny that. People use video games to procrastinate all the time. Just like you read books to procrastinate, you watch TV to procrastinate. Video games are super common because it's a common thing that people do, men do in particular. And so it's going to be a common go-to when you want to procrastinate, because it's something you like to do and you don't want to do the other tasks. So I don't think the problem is video games. Their problem is procrastination. And so if video games are becoming a procrastination go-to for you, as a man, I think you need to identify it. And I'm kind of against cold turkeying something that isn't unclean. Like the video game's not unclean.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't necessarily think you need to cut the video games out of your life and do the thing you're supposed to do. I think just do the thing you're supposed to do, pray about it, confess that it's sinful, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, whether it's doing homework or it's taking care of the children or it's doing your job. Like, it can be major things, it can be minor things, whatever it is. I think you need to nip it in the bud so that it doesn't become bigger and you don't continue to sin. Because the real sin there is the procrastination. That's the real basis. It's not the video game.
But I'm so productive when I procrastinate. Like, if I have to do my taxes, I will clean the entire house. I will mow the lawn. I will shovel the snow. I will do whatever it takes to not do them. And I'm accomplishing so much.
Yeah, once again, I think that's the way we excuse it, right? Because I think you're actually being lazy, as ironic and
right.
Juxtapositional as it sounds. Lazy to mow the lawn when you should be doing something else, when you should be paying the taxes. Or doing the taxes.
What a shame.
Yeah. And then last item I'll put here for the sixth of the genuine biblical expectations of men is to not misuse the body. And of course, these are directed against the video games. They're kind of not necessarily the top 6, like, ultimate list for expectations from the Bible, but they are ones that speak to the video game issue. As people, as humans in general, some men think that this is a particular calling to men, that we're supposed to be particularly fit because we're men and we're gifted with stronger bodies than women, and so it's like a stronger calling to men to not misuse the body of women. I don't know that I agree with that. Of course we're stronger than women by and large, and God's gifted us that way so that we can lift things and do other things with the bodies that women can't do as well. I totally agree with that. God's made us differently in that way. I don't know that means that we need to also get buff. Here's my pitch. I think that it can be equally sinful to get obsessed with getting buff as it is to acquire wealth or to be trying to escape in fantasy land video games. I don't think that the Bible calls you to get buff. But it does call you not to misuse the body. And I've talked to people who talk about this and who have mentioned this verse, and I want to touch on it. Many people who are into fitness, boys and girls, will say, my body's a temple. Okay, even the most secular dude out there, these alpha male gurus, they use the same quote, your body's a temple, man. So you gotta treat it right, you don't put drugs in it. And you gotta get jacked, because you want the temple to be beautiful, don't you? Okay. I don't think that getting jacked is a sin. It's kind of like video games. It's like just a thing you do, right? So it's perfectly good to go get jacked. And by jacked, I mean huge. I'm using vernacular. Maybe some people aren't familiar with it. But get muscular. Work out so that you're very strong. Not just normal strong, but very strong. It's perfectly great. And some people are particularly gifted in that area. So they're a strong warrior or weightlifter or just a good laborer. Great. I mean, it's all more as a talent that God gives, but I don't think it's sinful to not get huge. Which again, there are men, Christian men and non-Christian men alike, who believe it is sinful to not get huge. And I think there's misuse of the body and atrophying, like if you were getting really overweight or you're
feeble,
right? That there's sin involved there because you're misusing the body. You're either not eating enough, you're eating way too much, or you're intentionally not moving or doing things like that. You're not able to provide because you're so feeble. But that's so I agree that those are misuse of the body. The body is a temple, and I agree with the quote. I should probably quote it actually before I go on. This my body is a temple quote comes from 1 Corinthians 6. And this is where I think it kind of starts to fall apart. This whole you got to get jacked because your body's a temple, or you can't put drugs in it because your body's a temple. Because this is where it's coming from. It's coming from 1 Corinthians 6, where Paul says, flee from sexual immorality. All other sins a person commits are outside of the body, but whoever sins sexually sins against their own body. Do you not know that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit who is in you, whom you receive from God? You are not your own. You are bought at a price. Therefore, honor God with your bodies. So here you can clearly see in context he's talking about sexual morality. And in fact, he even says all other sins a person commits are outside the body.
Mm-hmm.
Which to me says that gluttony, for example, isn't really a sin against the body. Now, it hurts your body, but I don't know that it is a sin against the body. And the same goes for atrophying. I don't know that it's a sin against the body. It is a sin, and it affects your body. Many sins affect the body. I don't think it's actually a sin against the body. So I don't know that this verse is where you should go to for anti-gluttony stuff. I think you should go to the anti-gluttony verses for being anti-gluttony. And I think you should go to a different verse that I'll quote for exercise being good, right? As opposed to this one. Now, I exercise, and I do agree when I exercise, and I do maintenance, right? I'm not getting buff. And it's just, I don't think I'm particularly gifted in that area. So maybe I'm just being lazy. But I do maintenance because I know that if you don't do any maintenance, you'll end up as like a poor, feeble man. And I want to be able at least to, get up and take care of people like I should, right? Be able to do the things that I'm called to do, as opposed to being huge. Like, if I decided that the things I needed to do was like picking up cars, well, then I'm always going to fall short because I can't really pick up a car. And it would be useful to be able to pick up cars, I suppose, in niche scenarios. But I just want to be good enough to, walk and run appropriately and
carry things,
carry groceries, like things that you need to be able to do as a person to take care of other people. That's why. And I do it knowing that my body's not my own. So using this verse, I should honor God with my body. But I don't think that getting jacked is like the key component to honoring the temple. I think the key component to honoring the temple is not defiling it. That's really what it is. And not working out is not defiling the body.
You pretty much touched on anything. All I have to say is that I thought it was fascinating that the word used there is naos, which means sanctuary. Hieron is the building itself. Mm-hmm. Naos is the sacred part of the temple, the sanctuary.
Okay.
So
makes sense.
So what I think was trying to emphasize is that treat it with respect, because we belong to God, we're made in the image of God, and the Spirit of God is inside of us as Christians. So treat it with respect. Don't abuse it in one extreme by becoming a weakling, and don't overdo it with the wrong intentions. That is, if you're going to be jacked, huge, swole. That's another word people use.
Swole, yep.
So
well, yeah. And see, I just like getting obsessed with how big you look. I don't think that's dishonoring your body. I think that's pride and vanity, right?
Right. So it's a different intention.
Different issue, right? So I just think this is a misapplied verse. People misapply it to getting jacked when it really shouldn't be applied there. Here's the only one that I could find. Physical fitness style Bible verse that nobody usually quotes, I don't think, because it's not very strong. But again, it's kind of one of the only few ones that talks about getting jacked. So I really don't think it's a biblical expectation of men to get huge. Now again, God has gifted men with strength, physical strength, that is. Other kinds of strength too, but physical strength usually over women, right? So we naturally have a talent, and with talents we should use them. So we should use our strength to benefit those less strong than us. Physical strength. Mm-hmm. And so it's totally fine and is definitely a good thing when done correctly to get strong so that you can help others, right? I mean, there's nothing against that, right?
Just to have the right intentions.
I don't think it's sinful to not be huge, just like it's not sinful to be dumb. It's kind of just how it is. And you could get, if you're not very intellectual, right? You could get more intellectual, which is good. I think there's a baseline intellectualism that you need to have, like you need to be able to defend the faith to a reasonable extent, right? I would apply the exact same thing to the physicality, right? Some people aren't just born that strong. I'm not particularly strong, but I need to have a baseline physicality to be able to do baseline stuff, like pick up groceries and pick old ladies up on the street and like walk around, right? So I'm not a burden to others, but I don't need to be bodybuilder, just like the person who's not very intellectual doesn't need to be a debater. God gives us different talents. Here's the one verse that I found that has anything to do with training the body. 1 Timothy 4:8. This is Paul speaking to Timothy, of course. For the training of the body has limited benefits, but godliness is beneficial in every way, since it holds promise for the present life and also the life to come. So this is why it's not often quoted, because it says, for the training of the body has limited benefits, but godliness is beneficial in every way. So clearly Paul's saying here that godliness is more useful than training of the body. But, and the reason I quote it here is to say, but he does say training of the body has limited benefits, meaning positively it does have limited benefits. So it's not an insult to training the body here. So there you go. That's the only Bible verse I found that even really talks about it.
Little benefit, but there's still something there.
And we all see that. We all see there's benefits to getting trained.
Yes. Yeah. So just have the right intentions.
Yeah. So then I'll go over again really briefly and just say how it attacks the whole anti-video game perspective. Pursuing godliness is a biblical expectation. Video games shouldn't distract from that. With this caveat, if you're playing a game that is particularly ungodly, right? Like it's got a bunch of naked women, or it's causing you to have violent thoughts, right?
Or it's extremely violent and so like bloody.
Well, see, okay, so here's where I want to make a caveat. I think you can play an extremely violent game without it affecting you very much. However, if it is affecting you, you should
put it aside for a bit.
And so I guess the same thing applies for like naked women, right? On a video game, if it is not affecting you, I suppose it's fine. Although I highly doubt it's not affecting you, because if you're a red-blooded alpha male, it's going to affect you, right? So that's why I think one's a little different than the other. However, I mean, I'll grant that it's probably more common than I think for people to be affected by violence in video games to a bad degree. It gets the reason I'm so sensitive about that one is it gets overhyped. Like the media said that video games are turning boys into like bloodthirsty killers, and violence has gone down. I don't think it's turning boys into bloodthirsty killers. No, it may make some boys more violent. So I'm not saying that it's a guarantee that video games can't affect your psyche, but I don't think that it's a...
But it's not as widespread as some make it seem.
Yeah. So I would say it's case by case, if that's really a problem. But again, if pursuing godliness is affected by particular games you play, then maybe cut those out, right? But video games in general, just like books in general, any other media in general, aren't by themselves unclean and hindrance to pursuing godliness. So if there's a particular game that you don't want to play, okay, or genre game or whatever, that's fine to be in line pursuing godliness, but video games in general don't prevent you from pursuing godliness. And then we're going to take care of the garden. I'm going to combine this one with providing for your household, not being lazy, leading. If you're shirking your duty because of video games, well then yeah, of course it's childish to shirk your duty. It's neglectful, it's a fantasy that you're going to escape into and neglect your duties. Like those alpha male attacks against video games come true, but only because the video game is being used to shirk your duties. There are problems there shirking your duties, not the video game. So once again, I would say the God's expectations, biblical expectations for men is to do your duties, of which there's many we've already laid out. But if you're shirking the duties, that is the essence of laziness, and that's the problem. You can do that with video games, you can do that with a lot of things. If video games are causing you to shirk your duties, then fix the problem of shirking your duties, right? Could involve cutting out the video game, but it's not the video game that's really the problem. The root of the problem is the laziness. All right. So here's the conclusion. The final fireworks, not very surprising fireworks. The thing I want to emphasize here is that video games aren't unclean. I've said it a couple times in this podcast, but Jesus made all foods clean for a reason. I also think that we have Christian freedom, Christian liberty, people like to say, to do almost anything. And I don't mean that in a Corinthian sense, like all things are beneficial to me. All things are allowed for me, but not beneficial. There are things I would recommend doing because they're not beneficial at all, right? But you have to be completely unfamiliar with video games, not know their benefit. I'm not Sebastian, when you talk to some of the benefits of video games, but it's not an evil thing to do. Like the Corinthians quote that I just quoted about all things being lawful for me, but not everything is beneficial for me. That's speaking about sexual morality, right? Like you can still go to heaven and be sexually moral, but it's not beneficial for you, i.e. it is bad for you. Whereas video games are not bad for you as much as people say they are. And that's what I'm trying to say, they're not actually bad for you. Would you care to speak on any of the benefits? I'm going to be on like some programmer rage here.
Yes. So that's not. I'll hold myself back in that sense. This would be a bonus, I would say, and this is my take on things for games in particular. Something to keep in mind, I would say, and this is from a Christian perspective, is it worth spending my time doing this? So, for example, just like how there are shows that I wouldn't even bother watching. I would much rather watch documentaries because I believe I could get more out of it rather than reality shows. I suppose you could get something out of those, but probably not as probably. I would say not as much. Likewise, could I get something out of Call of Duty? Playing that game, maybe. However, from my experience, at least, I think that playing games that are strictly historical, could be grand strategy or role-playing, whatever.
Speaking of games, yes. Keep going. Sorry, I'm flat-tiring here.
Wait your turn, Michael. Wait your turn, okay? And... See,
I derailed you.
Yeah, just like push the train.
Those at home, me and Sebastian play a very nerdy video game called Europa Universalis 4, which sounds nerdy already, and it's a big, you get the whole world, big map, takes place in medieval times, so it's 1400s, and it goes to the 1800s, and you play as a country, and your goal is to manage your country well, to make money, to take over other countries, make diplomacy, so it's a classic, nerd game where you're managing a country in some fantasy land, but it is... I think first of all, like exercise your mind, so there's that, right? That's the classic thing. Like, improves your hand-eye, like Call of Duty improves your hand-eye coordination, which it does. So too, I guess.
Okay, yes, now I'm back on track. Yes, that put the train right back on track. So, because it is strictly historical, I think that I can apply that with church history. I like to read on church history on the side, so when I have time as well. And I think it's very, very useful. Because it helps understand people. How does that help me as a Christian now? Helps me understand the perspective and the thoughts of people that lived long before me. They have pretty much the same struggles, same oh my gosh, I have to get up morning to work, I have to go to church, stuff like that. And issues, obviously, back then probably more severe, like plagues coming in. Well, I mean, there's
plagues now.
Yeah, there's plagues. Never mind, take that back. There's, at least the kings are trying to kill us now, or persecute us. So maybe it's not that. I mean, there's not that at the moment. So that's good, I suppose. And anyway, with the game, I will give a quick example. Something I would, on my own, I do not think I would have even thought of relating. In the game, nations have their own special abilities. They have their own unique traits. The Palatinate. Probably none of you probably know what the Palatinate is. Like, who in the right mind would know what the nation of the Palatinate is in Germany? It's in Heidelberg. I'll give a quick example. Heidelberg Catechism. One of the unique traits of that nation. Had it not been through that game, I don't think I myself would have run into the Heidelberg Catechism, and it turns out it's actually a huge document in the foundation of the Reformed faith. Mm-hmm. So, I could have run into it, but I wouldn't know as much. I wouldn't have had the interest to look into it had it not been for that game. Likewise for, another example, the nation of Savoy doesn't exist anymore. Yes.
Savoy Pizza is the place here.
Okay, no, not quite the same Savoy, but an anti-pope. What the heck's an anti-pope? I probably wouldn't have thought of looking into it had it not been through the game. And actually, there's a really amusing story of how the king of Savoy proclaimed himself to be pope. Back when there were 3 popes, it could have been potentially 4 popes at the same time. Pretty amusing. Go check our Catholic episodes on that. But nonetheless, what's my point? Through that game, I have taken concepts that are, let's say, interesting, but also enlightening and relate to the history of the church. Same with even events in game that are actually timed in by years. So, like for example, a basic one, the Reformation, Calvin, Luther in Denmark as well. Unique historical events for the Reformation in Denmark, which I would have never even. I'm Danish. I wouldn't have even looked on my own. So, but through the games, like wow, you learn fun facts like that, and I think it can be beneficial in growth because then you can look up those people, for example, Jan Hus, who was before the game but still somewhat interesting. Look a little bit more into that, and can be enlightening to read and learn.
Yeah, and I don't want to get on the gamer rage classic thing where like there's as many video game haters as there are out there. There's many video game defenders who are like, it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, and we're like training our boys to be like the greatest combat warriors the world has ever seen because, you know, they train every day on Call of Duty. Okay, so there are some merits to that, like Sebastian just said. The historical video games teach you history, you need to invest in things that are beneficial in real life, right? I would say the same thing about Call of Duty and things like that. There are benefits like hand-eye coordination. I don't really care about that. More pressing to me is that games are a way of training for life, right? So just like we train with doing anything, like soldiers, for example, they train every day on fake rooms that they're clearing, and fake obstacles they have to climb, and fake targets they're having to shoot, all for the real thing, where one day they have to actually go to a real building where there's real bad guys and they have a real obstacle to climb. In the same way, video games for children and adults are training people to encounter obstacles. And I don't just mean this is some like grandiose, like I also sell video games and I just want to let you feel good about buying Call of Duty. I mean, they genuinely promote, for example, multiplayer games often promote working with people who hate you. Because your teammates or the enemy teammates or whatever, you have to cooperate with new strangers, and that's something you have to do in your job. And I would say that video games are probably the primary way for young boys to learn how to cooperate with other people. In the way that sports were like exclusively the way for boys to do that prior, now you can do it in sports, you can do it in school, you can do it in video games, learn how to cooperate with people who aren't you, right? It's a way of maturing. And even for people our age, and we are still learning on how to cooperate with other people who don't necessarily agree with us, games are a way of doing that. It is a fake scenario, just like the soldiers train in a fake combat scenario, but that doesn't mean it's bad. It just means it's training. And it might not be obvious training, right? Like Bejeweled. I guess you're training organizational skills, where you might need to organize your closet or a budget or something like that. And so some of these are stretches, right? Like I could be stretching a whole organizational thing, but I'll speak from experience. I love multiplayer games because of that aspect. Like you get to meet people you don't know about and cooperate on something you're doing together. Kind of like people go out and fish with people just to cooperate in doing something, or sports or whatever. They all have beneficial elements. Now, and to be clear, and to get off the gamer like apologist soapbox, am I prescribing video games? People go, oh yes, every boy must play video games. No, I don't think it's a problem if you don't play video games. However, and this brings me to the second point of the conclusion, I do think that in this day and age, in this country at least, full avoidance of video games for a boy is really weird. Like that kid will be the odd man out. I remember one of my dad's philosophies, something, just I'll be all about me, but one of my dad's philosophies when I was growing up was that at least for the formative years, I had to play, all the kids had to play some sort of sport, at least one type of sport throughout the year. Not that you always had to be playing sport, but there needed to be at least one sport within the span of a year, just so that you weren't a weirdo and you knew how to cooperate with people, doing an exercise. Like there's a lot of benefits to doing sports. That was his requirement. I don't know that I do the same thing for video games, but you could make the argument for it, and I think there's merit to it. And if you have a kid who's never, particularly boys, girls too, probably, especially more these days, but boys in particular, like if we meet a guy our age, especially, who doesn't know about video games, he's probably a weirdo.
Or he's going to stick out like a sore thumb.
Yeah, I would argue more than that. If he hasn't played any video games, he probably was like, I'm going to diss people. He's probably like homeschooled and also didn't watch TV and like doesn't know any cultural things. I've never known a boy that didn't know about video games who wasn't strange. Now, of course, that's just experience bias. But it's almost like it's barring your kids from the TV, right? There are problems with watching TV, but the kid will end up like being disconnected from the culture, not able to relate to other people his age because he didn't have. Now that's not the ultimate argument for video games, but it's strange to have made them unclean, so unclean that you can't touch them, and it's gonna like socially isolate them. In fact, it could become a dangerous idol, right? Because it's so common today for men to play video games in particular, boys, I guess, our age, that if he's raised, the kid was raised as that being like a thing that he doesn't do in particular because it's bad for you, it might become like a point of pride when it's not legitimately a point of pride. Like I can say, I guess it's a point of pride that I haven't like snorted cocaine or something, right? And I guess it's kind of prolific that people do drugs here, but it's a good thing not to like get drunk or whatever. Whereas I don't know that it's a good thing. It's kind of like saying you haven't eaten a ham sandwich before. Like, okay, whoop-de-doo. But if you like grew up, I'm never going to eat a ham sandwich, ham sandwiches are terrible, people get fat on ham sandwiches, and then everybody around is eating ham sandwiches, you might be like, sinners, like I'm the only one not eating a ham sandwich. When it's not actually sinful, like you're making something that's unclean, that's not actually unclean, and I think that's the sin in of itself. So I would say it is a mistake to bar video games from your kids or from yourself.
And with anything, you have to be careful, because if you bar for that, the kids might get rebellious and go crazy when they get the chance to.
Yeah, that's kind of the spirit, what I'm saying. For a lot of reasons, and that's a great one too. Like if you bar candy from your kids, you might have totally legitimate reasons. Like they fly around all the time because they're on sugar high, and you might need to restrict it, whatever. So not to backseat parent anybody, I don't have kids, but if you bar completely, you do give them mystique to it. So if you bar video games completely, or bar TV completely, I don't know that there's really, I don't think there's goodness. I mean, actually, you should pick your bands really wisely, right? And video games, I don't think is a wise ban. So my final conclusion statement is that all men are called and all people are called to fulfill through the Holy Spirit, because we know of our own flesh we can't, all of our callings as Christians, whether it's Christian women or Christian men, in whatever we do, and we should do it for the Lord, giving thanks to Him always. And I could quote, the Bible 10 times over on this point. Sebastian quoted it from Colossians. Work as if you work for the Lord. Do everything you do as if you work for the Lord. Giving thanks to Him always. So whether it's playing video games, whether it's doing the dishes, whether it's doing your taxes, don't shirk your duties, do them with joy. And when you play, remember the Lord. When you sleep, when you lie down, remember the Lord. When you get up, remember the Lord. When you go out, remember the Lord. When you come in, remember the Lord. When you're doing something innocuous, getting groceries, doing your budget, remember the Lord, give thanks to Him, and do it with fervor. And the same goes for video games. It's a fun time. Rejoice and remember God and thank Him for the video game. That way, it's at least it's edifying. Now, even if you're playing Bejeweled, like Roblox or something, okay, at least you're thanking the Lord for His creation, right? That He gifted mankind with the people who made Roblox, right?
Or you're thanking God that you have the time to play, because some people just don't have time. I have less and less time as I get older.
What are you talking about? I always these days I'm like, wow, I can see why people with children have less time, but like singles, I have more time than I've ever had in my whole life. Because work doesn't take.
I don't know what you do. You must be doing some miracles, Mike. I don't know.
So do this podcast, huh?
yeah.
And that's why we have found our cause. And serve the Lord Jesus Christ. I've been Michael, the man behind the machine, and to my right has been
Sebastian, the bookkeeper.
Thanks for listening. If you want to see the rest of our episodes, you can go to foundcause.podbean.com and download them all for your listening pleasure. That's only the audio, though. If you want to see the video, you can go to youtube.com and look us up, because we don't have a cool link for you yet. But on Facebook, it's facebook.com/foundcause. You can also download us on iTunes and Spotify and your Amazon Echo and anything else you want to get us on. We are there. And until next time, we talk about something completely different. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.